Welcome again. Thanks for joining us for our webinar, Six Keys to Improving Your Brain Health. As I said before, I'm joined here by Ted Witchick Jr., one of our psychologists here, our only psychologist here at ACCFS. And Ted, this is a fascinating topic.
Yeah.
Especially this time of year. You know that tomorrow is Quitter's Day, right?
Sure.
You know, the
Yes.
second Friday of every January is, the day when everybody kind of officially quits their resolutions. You could join that list.
I'm gonna hang on for a little bit longer
Okay,
than
yeah, you make another week.
Yes.
But I think it's important just to kind of capture that timestamp here a little bit in the sense that this is a very proactive topic that we're talking about here.
Yes.
This is thinking about how do we resolve or kind of purpose to live more healthily. And so you'll see a lot of the content today is maybe more on the teaching side, maybe more on the instructive side, but really with that proactive, that preventative type bent.
Yeah.
Because our mental health, our brain health is just as important as our physical health. I'm sure there's a stat out there that says how many resolutions are tied to like diet or exercise. I mean, I'm sure it's pretty high.
It's high, yeah.
But just speak into that a second. I mean, there's an interweaving of our bodies with all these different components. It's so important to think about.
Absolutely. As Christian people, we are oftentimes thinking about our spiritual health. And then as we think about our bodies that we live in, those are joined together in the sense that our mental health, our physical health, our spiritual health, all those things come together and are processed in our brain. And so we don't know how all that fits together. That's one of the mysteries of life, of how we come together. But that one of the things we think about here is just the biopsychosocial spiritual model. And I just want to take a look here at this verse, right? Psalm 139:14. It's such a beautiful verse. I will praise thee, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Marvelous are thy works, and that my soul knoweth right well. The brain is an organ like no other, and it's highly complex. It's to understand it is just being unlocked, and there's much more. So let's talk a little bit about how the brain is made up.
Yeah, let's do that because we could kind of geek out here for a little bit, but I think it's important. So let's spend 10 minutes or so and just think about facts and when we say the brain, because this is specifically on brain health.
Yes.
So talk a little bit about it, Ted.
So the brain is about 3 pounds, an adult brain, and it's made up of 60% fat. And in that there are about 86 billion neurons. That's these are big numbers, and a neuron is a brain cell, an individual brain cell. I love this quote, and I wanted to lay it out here because it really gives a staggering statistic about how the brain is put together. A piece of brain tissue the size of a grain of sand contains 100,000 neurons. That's 100,000 brain cells and a billion synapses. Synapses are where the neurons touch and those connections. And so once you take that grain of sand size and you take it out over this whole thing, there are billions of neurons.
Every grain of sand, 1 billion synapses.
Yes, a billion synapses. So there are billions and billions of these connections. So the thing about it is that as we grow, as a baby grows and as a brain grows, the human brain isn't fully formed until the mid-20s, about age 25. And what you find then is the frontal lobes, the up here, where we do the main amount of control, planning, reasoning, self-control, all those things, last parts to fully form. And so, as any parent of a teenager can attest, the bottom parts of the brain form first, and then it forms forward, and so it comes this way. And so that's where in adolescence you've got
When you
Yeah.
ask that thing, like, what are you thinking?
Yeah.
You're like,
Well, yeah, and so their emotion centers and the reasoning centers are there, but the maturity of
Yeah,
that and
yeah.
and their sense of, if you think about a 3-year-old and their sense of perspective of time, and to say, oh, just wait 10 minutes, just wait an hour, we're going to do that next
Are we there
Thursday.
yet? Are we there yet?
Nah, they don't have it. But an adult has those kind of things and can see perspective then of how others see them, those kind of things. I thought an interesting thing is just that you'll sometimes hear people say we only use 10% of our brain. And that itself is not a true thing. We're using all of our brain all of the time. And in terms of the capacities of what we could do, of what we could learn, and things like that, there's probably truth in that we could do more and things of that nature. But your brain is at work, and actually your brain is at work 24 hours a day.
Even when we're sleeping.
Even when you're sleeping, your brain is doing various functions. Yeah.
So I want to go back just to this
Yes.
visual, this picture, right?
Yes.
And you've got different components here, and we can maybe another time kind of do something where we talk through all the different components. But what you're saying is, I mean, all of these interactions within this structure, different components. There's like a map that you can do of like different functions, different areas within the brain.
That is correct. And in fact, one of the slides at the end of the program will have a link that you can go to for homework about the brain, and you can actually go look at pictures and then look at what different parts do and see their different functions. And it's truly amazing.
I think what's helpful for that, and we'll move on to this next slide, but I kind of think of the brain as like, it is or it isn't, right? It's kind of like this one thing. But the reality is, like, there's a complexity there, there's a diversity there, there's components that need to be, it's like you like our whole body having all the different pieces that we sometimes exercise or work with or whatever. Same could be said for the brain. There's different aspects that need to be kind of considered with that.
Absolutely. And the brain has not only different parts, it has different functions and how they work together. So let's look at some of them. The first one is that the brain is structural. So it literally, it's in two hemispheres, two halves. It has different lobes of the brain. So you've got back here parts of your brain that process visual information and balance. You've got parts that handle emotion and perception and all those things. Then the brain is also chemical. It has the neurotransmitters. You think of things like dopamine and serotonin and norepinephrine and things like that. So it's chemical. And then it's electrical. And you think of this is one that a lot of people don't think of, except when there's things when people have seizures or things of that nature. But an electroencephalogram can map that out. The brain actually processes things at about 20 watts. You could 20 watt light bulb.
20 watt light
Yeah,
bulb.
there you go. There you go. So it actually has, and its communications are heavily dependent on electrical. And then it's also vascular, meaning that there's blood vessels running throughout, taking oxygen and nutrients back and forth throughout. And all these things work together. They all intersect, and that out of that intersection comes something that's greater than any of those parts.
Sure.
And so we have memory. And so a long time ago, I mean, hundreds of years ago, they were trying to find out where memories were. And then when they would do the looking at the brain, they were like, okay, is it here? They know the memory of you going on the picnic. Well, the fact is, a memory for something is distributed all over the brain. And so, and our thinking and emotions, sensation, to feel hot and cold and to feel those different things. And then the thing that is really amazing is we have this biological thing going on, but then something rises above that gives rise to consciousness, to be aware, to be a person, to have an identity.
Yeah.
And so while we're alive, we don't do anything apart from our brain. Our brain is present with us. But here's a really important thing for us as Christians. We are more than our brain.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
Our brain, as important as it is, we are more than our brain. And then above that, we have an undying soul that will live on forever. So it's truly a beautiful thing. I will say something about this also, is that a lot of times people, when they think about it themselves, like, you don't view yourself as your liver,
Right.
okay?
No.
Oh, hey,
I try not to.
and
Right?
you know what? When somebody's has a problem with their kidneys or whatever, they generally go, "Oh, I have a problem with my kidneys." The interesting thing is when people are having difficulty with their brain, whether that's an emotional issue like anxiety, depression, or whether their memory isn't good or things like that, they oftentimes go to, "There's a problem with me."
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so what happens in the brain is really closely identified
With
with
ourselves.
ourselves, and sometimes overly so in a way that produces shame.
So I really appreciate that point where like all of these different points, aspects of the brain, the summation is greater than them all put together, right?
That's
Right. I mean,
right.
this isn't just a 20-watt electrical circuit,
That's
right? I
right.
mean, or just,
That's right.
the right number of chemicals running through.
Yeah,
There is something, and that goes to that fearfully and wonderfully made piece, right? There is something
absolutely.
that God turns that into a beautiful, um, something deeper, but
That's
very core to our being.
absolutely. And that's why when something happens to our in our brain that isn't working well, we find, and that could be everything from, having an injury, whether it's a stroke or a head injury in a car accident, whether it's a kind of thing that shifts across our life, like a woman going through menopause or perimenopause. I'm somebody who has migraines at
Yeah,
times,
yeah.
and so that's going on in the brain, and so there's all these different things. There's also, as we live, as we age, there's a real sense of, okay, yes, I want to age well, but then there's also, how does my memory work, and how do I age well? So let's look at the question of what is
Yeah.
brain health
So
itself.
definitionally, you've got a couple of different organizations here, and kind
Yep.
of the kind of official definitions. Walk through each of these, Ted,
Yeah.
and just kind of say, okay, what is brain health that we're talking about today?
Yep. So this first one says brain health is the ability to maintain optimal neurological functioning throughout life, which supports physical, mental, and social well-being. I wanted to put this one in here because neurological functioning is about your brain and spinal cord, okay, and then as it goes out, and so that affects everything that we do some way or another. But here's the next thing that I would say related to this. And the key about this is that brain health supports physical, mental, and social well-being. We don't think about our brain, but our brain is part of all those things. When you're sitting in church listening to a sermon, your brain is engaged.
Yeah. Yeah.
When you're having a birthday party or when you have whatever, it's all those things. When you're figuring out your taxes, your brain is involved. So with all these things, the purpose of brain health is to support these things. Now, the next one, the World Health Organization's talks about brain functioning across cognitive, that's your thinking, sensory, that's being able to, all your sensations, five senses, social, emotional, okay, being able to relate to others, behavioral, that's to be able to do and live out the things in the kind of ways you want to, in motor domains. And so what you have is the ability to walk and process and fine motor skills, all those things. But here's the thing that I wanted to highlight: allowing a person to realize their full potential over the course of their life. Okay, because this is
As things shift and
as
grow
things
and
shift and
age over
grow.
time.
Okay, because I'm going to be 52. I'm not 25. Okay,
Right.
and I know that, and I also know I'm not 75. Right, but all of us and some of you, as you listen to this, you're in different places in that. But here's the thing: to reach your full potential over the course, irrespective of the presence or absence of disorders. What we mean here isn't that there aren't disorders present. Like for myself, I have migraines. So the question is, how do I live in a way that helps my brain and body function the best under these conditions?
Yeah.
So if somebody, let's say somebody has a parent who went on to develop Alzheimer's dementia or some kind of neurological thing, and they're saying, okay, whoa, you know what? Is that going to happen to me? Or what can I do about this? Or, And so one of the things we know from much research that has been done in this area is that there are things that we can do to help our cognitive, emotional functioning and those kind of things, to delay certain things, to try to improve certain things. So depending on your situation, some of you are in a preventive mindset, or how do I learn about these things? Others are dealing with things and going, ah, man, I feel really foggy. My thinking isn't good. What can
Yeah.
I do to make sure that my brain and body are functioning the best that it can, so that I'm in the best place to handle this anxiety, or handle
hmm
this attention problem I have, or to, let's say I had somebody has a stroke or has a brain injury. What are the things that we can do the best under the circumstances?
So proactively, wherever we are at,
Hmm.
how do we move to a place of health, right? To
That's
best
right.
be able to kind of deal with these things, or kind of walk through whatever we kind of find ourselves in.
Exactly. And we've all got something,
Yeah.
okay? And so this is not about you do these 6 things and you won't ever have that again.
Mhm.
But here's the thing, there's a big difference. If these 6 things we're going to go through, if I don't follow them, okay, my symptoms are significantly worse
Yeah.
than when I follow them.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so I'm not trying to say that I'm the best example of all these
Yeah.
things either. I'm just saying
Yeah.
I know for myself this is the case.
Well, and here's the 6 things, just to kind of get to that idea of 6 keys. These are
Hmm.
pulled out from a couple of different places. There's a couple different similar models you can find. But with these 6 things, how do we get our brain, to your point, Ted,
Hmm.
into the most healthy place so that we can deal with whatever we have to deal with?
That's
And
great.
there's things we won't get into. This isn't going to get as much into like that emotional health type component about how do we, navigate our thoughts, or there's other
Hmm.
resources we have on our website that kind of get into that place. But for the context today, all these, we'll walk through each of these one at a time, and kind of just a few points on each of these.
Yep.
And I will make a note that on our website, we'll put this PowerPoint on there and the recording of the webinar. And within that PowerPoint, there'll be several links to other websites where you can go deeper. So we're going to do a flyover, but if you want to go deeper, there'll be a lot of resources kind of within that handout on our
Yes.
website later. Okay. So let's start with physical exercise.
All
Okay. I
right.
mean, this is that you usually, if we go to the doctor, right, right, they're going to ask that question: how
Yep.
much, how
Yep.
active are you, right?
Yep.
And so this has an impact on our brain health.
Yeah, absolutely, directly, in fact. And so one of the things that we would say is that exercise is not only has an impact on our brain, but it has an impact then on things indirectly, like our heart, blood
Mm-hmm.
pressure,
Mm-hmm.
which then has an impact on our brain.
Because of
So
those components
because of
of
those
like, yeah.
components.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to just mention something right here, is that heart health and brain health are inextricably linked. And so one of the phrases that you'll sometimes hear is, whatever good that you do for your heart is good for your brain. If you do something good for your brain, it's good for your heart,
Mm-hmm.
because they are inextricably linked. I think one of the things is, if you're not exercising or very minimal, the goal is to just try to do something and to kind of lean into that. I'm going to give some recommendations based on what the research is saying.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not trying to say that
Mm-hmm.
you or I are the perfect examples of all these things. We try,
Mm-hmm.
but I think one of the things is that you need to work with your healthcare professionals and where you're at in your life and age and other conditions to figure out what's best for you. But exercise classes are particularly good. One of the things I'm going to say here is, the reason is because sometimes we get a 2-for-1 or a 3-for-1.
Yeah.
So when you do an exercise class, you also get accountability. You also get social interaction,
Which is going to come up later.
which is going to come up later.
Mm-hmm.
So there's reasons for that. But when we exercise goals, 150 minutes of moderate intensity aerobic exercise, or 75 minutes of vigorous exercise of the current guidelines, and some muscle strengthening activities on 2 or more days. Again, we're not trying to tell you that you have to be able to go run a marathon. 26.2 miles. Is that your
Yeah, that, no,
is
ain't
that
gonna happen, right?
a
Right?
quitter's day? That was
Yeah.
it. That was his
I had a goal for 2 weeks, yeah,
yeah.
no.
But the thing about it is, you can walk on your treadmill, walk around the
Mhm.
block, things of these natures, but we just can't get around it. The reality is, exercise is part of what makes our brain work well. And by the way, as you go to the follow-up slides and the links, there'll be links on things that you can do. There are also links that show more about the science of how this
Yeah.
works together. So those of you who are interested in how does this all come together, there's information there as well.
So let's drill just a little bit here, just to think about this. So it's either or, right, for that first part. So some type of aerobic, but then
Yep,
also some type of muscle strengthening, right?
that
So trying to
that's
combine
correct.
those. And it doesn't have to be overly profound,
No.
it's kind of start and walk down that path, and maybe it leads you towards more and more over time.
Mm-hmm.
But even some simple calisthenics or push-ups or
Yep.
or sit-ups or something like that starts down that path of intentionally thinking about health.
That's correct. And the thing that to remember with this is that as you do this, uh, the it's good to remember the why you're doing what
Yeah.
you're doing. And so for this, if you walk and you're going like, okay, I'm walking for my brain today because Ted says I have to. I think one of the things is it's not a you walk today, you've got a great brain
Mhm,
tomorrow. It's
mhm,
part of this is part of a lifestyle that leads us in a
mhm.
direction. And that direction is we want to be good stewards of this body. And again, for somebody, that might be all they can are able to do is things sitting in a chair. For somebody else, it might be going and walking regularly. For
Mhm.
somebody else, it might be going to the gym. Based on your age and stage and those kind of things, you need to figure out what works with you. And I would say this, that doing something is better than nothing. Finding something that you like doing, like
Yeah,
swimming.
yeah.
So for me, I like listening to podcasts when I walk.
Mhm.
Okay, so
But it's a two for one,
that's a
right?
two
It's a
for
way to
one.
learn and
Yeah.
also get something going.
And other people like to be, to go do something with a partner. And we're just going to be different as far as that
I
goes.
want to capitalize on one other thing, and then we'll move on to the next one that you said there.
Hmm.
It's gonna ebb and flow as time goes on,
Oh, for
right?
sure,
I there's a
for sure.
neighbor of mine that kind of and he's an older gentleman and he used to run all his life, right?
Hmm.
And it looked more like probably that, hour and 15, maybe even 2.5 hours a week, probably 2.5 hours a week type thing. But as he got older, he found that all he could do was even sometimes just get up and walk around the block.
Yep,
And yet he was getting up and walking around the block. And he
yep.
stayed, and I'm not saying it's a direct causation, but he stayed mentally sharp until the end of his life,
Hmm.
right? Because it's part of like just that habit, just that discipline,
Hmm.
and he was usually listening to something as he was doing it, right? But
Hmm.
but think about how do you make this work for you in a way that just takes one step in that right
Yep,
direction,
yep,
1%, 5%, in the right way.
yep. I think one of the things is that you would make there's a really strong case to say if there was one thing that you wanted to do for your brain health, um, that to help it
Hmm.
along,
Hmm.
it would be exercise. Because of all of the different
Other benefits.
now that's not to say the other ones aren't there, but
But there's
it goes to heart, blood pressure, body
yeah,
weight, blood sugars, all those
there's a
things.
reason why the doctor asked that, right? I mean
There
that
are.
that there's a reason why this is a question that often comes up. So okay, so
Yep.
we're gonna go from exercise to probably the second most commonly asked question is, how's your eating habits or
Yep.
what's your food nutrition type? Because eat smart, think better. So how we eat has a direct impact as well.
Absolutely. So when we talk about health and food, one of the things is that different people have different needs. So I'm answering the question about what are the healthiest things that happen for your brain. If somebody else has another condition, they need to have this or that or
Mhm.
whatever, that you're going to have to take that into consideration. But if you do research on what are the healthiest things for your brain, you're going to find these common kinds of foods in there, the olive oils, the nuts, like
Yeah.
the walnuts and
Mhm, mhm.
salmon, fatty fish, the leafy leafy greens, vegetables, those kind of things. There are two diets, the Mediterranean diet and the one that came out of that called the MIND diet, which is the Mediterranean DASH diet, intervention for neurodegenerative delay, are both considered brain healthy and heart healthy. Again, what you're going to find is that they're working in
Direct correlation between those
those
two.
correlations there. And what they tend to do is they tend to highlight healthy fats, which are good for your brain,
Mhm.
and so therefore, when and again, I am not advocating a kind of mindset though that says you can never enjoy your birthday cake
Yeah.
or things of that nature. Really, the issue is we don't want to look at food as in such stark contrast that it becomes its own problem.
Yeah.
But we do want to do it this way and kind of say, I need to move and lean this direction. One of the intervening variables that they find is that food is also something that can really help in the reduction of inflammation.
Yeah, speak to that a little bit there.
Yep.
What's the meaning of that?
So chronic, our body is designed to have inflammation, especially like when you have an injury. It's why it
Yeah.
swells.
Mhm,
Okay,
mhm.
so inflammation in response to an injury is a correct response. The problem is that two things are creating an overabundance of inflammation in our bodies and in particular
Mhm.
in our brains. And that is the typical American diet, okay, that uses a lot of the unhealthy
Mhm,
foods,
mhm.
tends to amplify inflammation. The other thing is chronic stress amplifies
Okay.
and the fact is American society and most Americans are living in a way that does not allow their bodies and brains to experience the kind of quietness that reduces the inflammation. So again, anything we can do to kind of quiet
So the
that,
food is one aspect that can
it,
start to kind of
absolutely,
calm
and
that.
these kind of things are things that help the brain and
Mhm,
body
mhm.
to do. Again, there's additional resources about that. Go ahead.
But the problem is, I mean, so one of the things is, I mean, I think most of us, if we go, to the doctor, or whatever, and they say you need to eat better, you're gonna nod our head and say, okay, sure, sounds good,
Yeah,
until the choice is in front of us,
yeah.
right? And
That's right.
you've got the chocolate cake on one hand or
Yeah,
the walnuts on the other, right?
yeah,
And you're
yeah,
kind of
yeah.
like, okay, can we
Yep,
like,
yep,
how much am I willing to invest? And
yep.
so that's that point that's in there. I think that
Yeah.
third point that says it is sometimes going to cost a little bit more, right?
Hmm.
It's going to be a little bit more time and effort,
Yeah.
but you have to view it as an investment.
Yep.
It's kind of like you take your car, to get
Hmm.
oil changed, tires rotated, some of those kind of
Yep.
things, because if you don't, you end up alongside the road somewhere. And
Yeah,
and somewhat we're talking a little bit of a similar concept. There's a
exactly.
cost to health.
And I think one of the things is that you can look at it as, if you look at it as investment, then what you're doing is you're looking at taking care of and stewarding and living into. And that's what we want to do. Again, we're not doing it to worship our bodies. We're not doing it to worship food. We're doing it to make sure that our system has what it needs to do the work and to live things out the way we can. Again, each of you are going to have your own dietary needs and body types and genetics and all those different kind of things. So you're going to have to modify that. I will say one thing, that the research on that bottom bullet
Yeah.
about
Alcohol and
alcohol and
smoking.
smoking,
Hmm.
I'm gonna tell you that there's no case to be made for smoking. And what research is showing is alcohol's effect on the brain, particularly moderate to high use, it is just it's neurotoxic for sure. And right now there's a real debate about any alcohol at all. Again, those are lifestyle choices you have to make, but I'm just saying that from a brain
Yeah.
perspective, um,
It becomes really hard though here, Ted, right? Because now we're talking about long-term investment with some of these
That's
things,
right.
right? It's
That's
not like
right.
you're gonna change your diet in 2 days from now. You're gonna be like instantly like, your IQ is gonna go up 5 points.
That's correct.
But this is saying, am I investing in a long-term health model?
And that's why too, like with cutting out alcohol, if somebody has a glass of wine
Hmm.
at Christmas or on a special
Hmm.
occasion, that's not what we're talking about
Hmm.
here. What we're talking about is long-term consistent use.
Patterns. Hmm.
Moderate to high use of alcohol is neurotoxic for sure.
Yeah, and if you know, again, if we know that every time we walk by the potato chip aisle,
Yeah,
in the grocery store, it's not good,
yeah,
and the advertisers are doing their thing,
yeah,
we might have to figure out just a different walking pattern, right?
yep,
Or just that's
yep,
that's the discipline point,
yep, yep, yep. So
Let's go on to the third one then. Okay, so we've talked about exercise, we've talked about food and nutrition. Third one gets it kind of tied similar, but this
yep,
is the medical health piece, right?
yep,
Knowing your medical health, perhaps knowing your family's medical health, and just stepping into that again with this proactive type
yes.
mindset.
There is significant research going on right now that is looking at various factors and seeking to predict outcomes. Now, in population research that takes big samples and it says, hey, these things relate to this, these, do this and it's beneficial, these things not. It doesn't mean for any one person how it will be. We all know that person that have heard of that person that ate bacon and eggs for
Yeah,
3 meals a
those
day,
stories stand
you
out,
know,
right?
that did all those things. Well, that's an outlier, and it's
Yeah.
in its own way. That person that didn't care for their body, and stuff like that. But what we're looking at here, and I will just say at the end, one of the things I'm going to ask you to do is take a brain care score, or
Hmm. Hmm.
brain care scale score. And one of the things it's going to do is ask your numbers on some key measures. Okay. And so one of the things they've found is that there's some key measures that when they're at a good level or bad level, they can go out, you can go scope out 40 years in the future,
Hmm. Hmm.
and say what difference does this make? And so, first of all, some of you just need to go get your physical, get your blood work done. I mean,
Hmm.
some people are like it's their badge of honor to not get it.
Hmm.
And knowing your numbers, I would say is one of the things that you do that's A, stewardship for yourself,
Yeah.
and B, I will tell you, it's about to the people that in your life.
Yeah.
Arlen, you need to know your numbers for Katie.
Yeah.
You need to know your numbers for your 3 kids.
Yeah.
Okay. That's part of the reason you need to know your numbers. And it's not saying I can't promise the outcome of my health or anybody's
Hmm.
health, but this is one of those things that we can know ahead of time.
Hmm.
Now, your own medical history, some of you have different conditions that run in your family, and it's because of that you're going to need to be aware of
Hmm.
uh, A or B, some heart disease or certain kinds of cancers or whatever. But the four numbers that I really want to highlight here are your blood pressure. Blood pressure is and keeping it under control, and it doesn't matter. Okay, the key is making sure it's controlled. Okay, if you got to do something to deal with it, the key is getting those numbers where your practitioner says they should be for you. Blood sugar is the same thing. You should know what your A1C is, or that range is, to make sure that it's in a level that's healthy. Because again, the outcomes of blood sugar and diabetes,
Hmm.
then changes the vessel structure, metabolism, all those things, brain. Okay. Cholesterol. Cholesterols are fats, okay, or types of and things like this. Again, we need, remember the brain was
Yeah. Yeah.
60%
There's good
fat.
cholesterol and there's
Okay,
yeah.
there's healthy things, unhealthy things. There's ranges for all these things.
Hmm.
So it's not about all or nothing. But what we're trying to do is lower one thing, amplify another as we're working on these. And then your overall weight. Again, there's different body types. It's
Yeah.
not about just saying that you have to be at this particular number, but you need to be with your healthcare practitioner healthy for you.
Hmm.
And so those are key things. I think one of the other things is if you do have a family history of certain kinds of conditions
Mhm.
out in front in the future, oftentimes that's what wakes people up.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
you know,
Mhm.
but I think one of the other things is it just some people say, "What can I do?" And I would just say this: we're trying to just lean into a healthy lifestyle. The goal isn't to live into life out of fear,
Mhm.
okay?
Yeah.
And that's an easy thing to fall into at times as, oh no, I don't, and I have to, and the goal is to live in a way that moves us towards living in
Yeah.
abundance. And so the goal isn't to fear these things, but it's to live in a
Yeah.
healthy way.
And a resolution might be even for this year is saying I need to create a relationship, a good relationship with a healthcare provider, like a
Mm-hmm.
family doctor or something that I'm gonna go to regularly,
Mm-hmm.
and that they're gonna educate me or help me know what to look
Mm-hmm.
for. I mean, because you can go down the route and say, well, okay, I'm gonna make WebMD my best friends, you know, and do all
Sure.
this research,
Sure.
or we
Yep.
can lean into the expertise that's around
Yep.
us
Yep.
and let them help guide us kind of in that way.
Yep.
And you're gonna, I mean, it's when you go to those places and you have that long form you got to fill out, right? It's like multiple pages of like,
Yep.
what's the history of your, you know,
Yep.
all of this kind of stuff. But there's a reason for that, right?
That's
Because
right.
it's trying to just think through what are potentialities that we need to be mindful of and things to be tracking. I'll tell you, we just had this, like Katie and I were just having a conversation with one of our family members, and she found out something in her family medical history that she had totally never known,
Mm-hmm.
right? You know, a
Mm-hmm.
history of some type of condition. She's like, okay, so now that's on my radar, right?
Yep.
I'm not fearful of it,
Yep.
but now I'm at least aware that there was someone in the
That's right.
family that had this, you
That's
know,
right.
and the
Mm-hmm.
doctor, you know, if you have a good healthcare provider, they're thinking along those lines as well,
That's
right?
right. Because early intervention is what we're
Mhm.
trying to seek. And again, our bodies are we want to do the best we can with them, but our bodies are
Yeah,
they are temporary in the sense that they're going to be
yeah,
renewed. We're
yeah.
gonna we're gonna have renewed bodies, but these are not.
And that's that tension,
Yeah.
right? We're trying to
Yeah.
do the best we can, but we're being good stewards. You said
Yeah.
that word stewards,
Yeah.
but we also know that it's up to God, right? And we lean our faith upon Him ultimately.
Absolutely. And a 75-year-old, if you're 75 and your job is not to compare yourself to a 25-year-old, even your 25-year-old
Yeah.
self. It's to try to, at your time of life, to do the things best for that.
So
Okay.
let's go to the fourth one. This is
Mhm.
sleep and relaxation. And actually, I'll build this point, and then I'll turn over you, Ted.
Mhm.
But it just what we just talked about. It seems like, at least in my experience, this is one of those ones that's easy to kind of put off and kind of go that superhuman thing and be
Yep.
like, oh, I don't need sleep, or I don't need
Yep.
to rest, or I don't need to relax, because we can figure it all out, or we can do it ourselves, or we can be self-sufficient.
Yep.
But the reality is, there's an investment here that shows us number one, and we can go spiritual, that says puts stewardship up on its proper place
Yep.
and takes ourselves and our own abilities out of the center of the world and says, okay, it's okay to sleep sometimes.
Mhm.
It's okay to take care of ourselves sometimes. It's okay to rest within reason, right? I mean, you know, and
Yeah.
have that balance. So speak a little bit more of
Yep.
what we've seen in this area of sleep and relaxation.
Yep. So it's oftentimes been kind of a badge of honor to be too busy to sleep,
Hmm.
and to power through with just add more coffee,
Hmm.
and those kind of things. And again, you know what? There's times and places that those kind of things happen, but on an ongoing basis, what we're really looking at is developing a good cadence of sleep and addressing sleep related problems.
Yeah.
It's important to see, and I think one of the most interesting things is to understand in the Jewish way of life, um, things started at sundown.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
and I think one of the things that we could take from that is from a God's eyes perspective, the time that we sleep he's holding the universe together. Well, he's holding the universe together when we're
All the
awake.
time, right? He doesn't, yeah, neither
But
help.
what happens is for us, it's almost like if I'm not doing it, and we fall into it. You fall into it, I fall into it. And so one of the things is that he's teaching us we take the breaks.
Mhm.
And so I want to encourage people. Oftentimes, a large percentage of the population has problems with things like insomnia, things like sleep apnea are common, those kind of things. And I want to encourage you to find ways to deal with those.
Or reach out for help.
Reach
Perhaps
out
it's
for
like
help.
yeah,
Yes,
there's professionals that walk through that.
absolutely. And I think what happens is a lot of people and because here's the thing, we want sleep when we want sleep.
Mhm.
We don't want sleep when we don't want sleep. And so what happens though is that our body tends to need to go into sleep and to come out of sleep. Okay.
Mhm.
And we each have different kind of cycles and those kind of things. But so when we look at this, you might have a day or two that you have some trouble, and
Mhm.
if you know your family has a wedding coming up this weekend, you might be having,
Yeah, yeah.
that happens, and we're not really looking at it from that standpoint. But here's the thing we want to say is that sleep is one of those things that allows your brain to consolidate memory. Okay, so if you want to know what helps memory, adequate sleep. It also during the time both sleep and exercise
Mhm.
have parts of time where your brain is shedding out other things. It's
Mhm.
getting rid of things that
Processing through, yeah. Mhm.
it's and getting rid of things that need to go out of the brain. So we need to I would encourage you to view your sleep as a fuel source for the things that you care about. It is it is easy to view it as optional.
Yeah.
Another one, again, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I just want to build on one point there. That idea of getting into sleep, and so you
Yeah,
can I don't know if the term is sleep hygiene or what it is,
yes,
but
it
just
is.
is
Yep.
how do you like what you can't look at screens right up and then lay down in bed and expect to fall asleep, right?
Yeah,
How do you start to slow your mind down? How do you start to shift your eyes from that
yeah.
that light into the proper light? I remember talking to someone once who kind of studied some of this and like, is your room dark? Is the right type of sound that kind
Hmm.
of
Hmm.
helps you kind of move into that. And it's the pattern as much.
Yeah,
Your body trains itself into a pattern to say, this is
sure.
how I get ready to sleep. And that's important, right?
Absolutely.
And those are kind of things you can think about, research, kind of study a little bit. But to your point, we think, oh, it's just a flip of a switch.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
there's a little bit more involved to that.
Yep.
But the point is make it a priority.
And across the life cycle, one of the things that they find is, I mean, like teenagers are notorious for not getting enough sleep.
Yeah.
Okay. And so when you take not enough sleep on top of that formation of the brain and on top
Hmm.
of the emotion and things like that, you get meltdowns, you
Hmm.
get bad behavior. Well, it's not that different for
Hmm.
adults. And then and again, as we across the age span, this changes and different people's sleep patterns change. But I would also say this too is that finding a good routine, I think, is part of that.
That last point. Speak about that
Yes.
last point a little bit.
So this one, um, uh, the concept of relaxation, stress reduction, is really important. And it's easier to say that we need to relax than it often is to do. And so there are things like meditation, mindfulness, to be able to let go of the busyness and the noise that's up
Hmm.
here and to quiet ourselves. We really appreciate that there are many good forms of Christian practices and spiritual disciplines that help with this.
Hmm.
And so some of the things in our spiritual formation tools,
Hmm.
we have some tools in the resources that really are about quieting the mind. Now, here's the problem. Most people that are overly busy and we're doing this, if you say, I will do that when I have time.
Yeah.
Now, it's a good thing that my wife isn't here because
She might listen later.
yeah, well, don't tell her that I'm doing this. But the thing about it is is that is really, really seductive, that when I have time,
Yeah.
when I have time,
Yeah.
I'll relax when it's all done,
Mhm.
when it's all done.
Just two more things to get done, and then suddenly, right? It is,
Exactly. And the thing about it is, research is very, very clear on this, that taking those breaks to quiet ourselves increases focus, increases our ability to problem solve, lowers our stress, the emotion center of our brain's right size, the balance between the thinking part and the emotion part balances out, which helps us actually to live out life the way that we want to live them.
Yeah. So prioritize it. And as we prioritize it, we're again that spiritual component. We're putting kind of God on his throne even more so. I mean, there's almost something that's like letting go of control and saying, okay, I'm going to turn myself over to rest and to sleep because he's commanded me to, right? And it's going to be healthy for our bodies as well. Fifth one, okay, mental fitness. So a little bit of this idea of the, physical fitness kind of, but just in the mental side, okay? So how do we use our brain, the mental capacities, and continue to exercise that muscle, kind of treat it as almost as a muscle?
So if you think about it, as the brain is growing, little kids are exploring from birth, and they are exploring and touching, and everything's going in the mouth, and they're looking around, and what their little brains are doing are making connections and building more synapses, those connections, and that does several things. Number one is that helps to create a well-rounded and healthy brain that can do all the different functions that we need. As we age, we tend to kind of fall into ruts. Okay, we're no longer in school. We kind of do this thing of, hey, you know what? I did my time, kind of a thing. I want to encourage everyone to have the mindset of being a lifelong learner. Okay. And a lifelong learner means to continue with mental calisthenics, like physical exercise. And again, part of this is by challenging the brain, okay, it learns and grows and things of that nature. The fact is, we tend to get in our ruts and like to stay in them. But when we can do things that challenge the brain, that's why you've all heard of things like doing crossword puzzles and Sudoku. What is happening? It's not only just looking at numbers, it's using logic, it's using deduction, it's using reasoning power, but also things like playing an instrument, right? Learning an instrument. One of the things that they talk about, it's hard to do as an adult, is learning a language. But again, what's it doing? It's stretching, it's pushing and pulling. None of these things mean you have to become the best at it. Enjoying the arts and artistic experiences. I mean, again, what is it? Oh, it's new. It's opening the mind in those things. So we're seeking things that challenge the mind to process, to remember, to shift, to calculate, to connect. And so there are a lot of online and digital games and things of that nature that will do these kind of things. And so a lot of them are free, some of them have cost. But the concept is, however you're doing it, is that we're trying to not put the brain on autopilot. We're trying to keep the brain in an engaging.
I mean, sometimes they say, like my brain hurts, right? I mean, but I mean, there's a piece of it that's like that's the point, right? We're stretching a little bit, and it can be something small. Like my mom is getting a little bit older in age, and I'm helping her kind of take care of some things. But one of the things that I kind of encourage her strongly to do, I'm like, I need you to balance the checkbook, right? I need you to do some math, and balance the checkbook, because it forces her to do some things that she normally wouldn't. She'll use her brain, right? And that kind of a thing. Or, something that I force myself into, even though it's not natural, right? Is I usually find myself reading some like longer classical type novels here or there, right? Because it's gonna stretch me. I'm not gonna get as much out of it. It would probably be quite as enjoyable as another book I could pick off the shelf. But yet it kind of forces me to kind of just broaden that and use that mental fitness.
It does. And this is where, depending on where you're at in your life, what your interests are, all those different things. It's going to be different across people.
So find something that kind of appeals to you, right? So it's not total
Yep.
drudgery,
Yep.
but that it pushes you
Yep.
to kind of have that lifelong learning, mental fitness type aspect.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay, last one then that we're going to walk about is just this social interaction. Okay, engaging with others. Our relationships have a large impact on our brain, our health, our well-being, overall health and growth. What are some of the things that they are finding,
Yep.
in this space?
The human brain is designed to socially connect, and that's ultimately part of that image of God, the relational component. The thing about it is, what they're finding is that social connection not only plays deeply into our emotional life, but it plays deeply into how people progress, particularly in aging and over time. Social isolation is a plague across the world. In the United States, it's a plague. We have a couple of figures here. One is that over half U.S. adults report feeling like no one knows them well. Okay, think about it, half. Of people. Who knows me?
Yeah,
who's in here? Social isolation, for people to feel lonely. The Surgeon General of the United States just put a huge report about loneliness as a public health problem. In fact, one study found that loneliness, chronic loneliness, I'm not talking about, the teenager who thought they had plans tonight and they don't, and they're feeling lonely in their room. That's a one night thing. We can all feel that. But chronic loneliness had the same impact on health as smoking 15 cigarettes.
Yeah, right.
Those kind of things. I think that this is where also churches play such a big portion of that. Even our church nursing homes and things like that, to make sure people aren't isolated or connecting with people back and forth. And this is really important because it's to remember that we're members together. But it's hard for us to even make the connection that going to lunch with somebody and brain health might be connected.
Yeah.
But actually, and you can look further at the neuroscience of this and some of the other links. The fact is, social connection shows up on these lists of what is preventative and healthy for brain health, on all these lists. It just is there.
And some of us are more apt to make relationships than others. And it's not about number. It's more about like that quality, right? It's not saying you have to have 5 to 10 good relationships, 1 to 2 that you can kind of connect with and have some level of interaction. That's a huge difference in the trajectory.
And I think what happens is that a lot of times when we look at the difference between solitude, which most people find helpful, they like, if I'm alone and I'm reading, or I have this quietness, solitude and loneliness, the difference between the two is feeling socially alienated. Okay. And that aloneness versus something as a painful experience. And so I do think that that's where it is something to be tended. And again, it's also why as people age and as spouses pass away, as friends pass away, things like that, it can take effort to do. But that's where again that church family and the intergenerational relationships. That's a huge.
Or, I mean, again, you can tie these in with other things at certain points, with this idea of like, I mean, maybe this is a book club learning type setting with social interaction, or an exercise group that exercises and does things together, or healthy eating group, or whatever. There's a way to kind of do the 2-4 or the 3-4 type thing.
And that's where in some of the congregate living situations, there's a puzzle room, and people go down there, sit, and they talk, and they talk about what's going on. They put a puzzle together: mental fitness, social interaction. It's hard to imagine that it's the accumulation of the small things that end up being the big things here.
And I think, and we're going to move towards resources here in the few minutes we have left. And if you have questions or things that discourage, you can chat those in. We'd be glad to try to look at those here towards the end as well. But I think there's the opportunity here is to kind of go back and think through each of these 6 components and just think of like, what is one small thing you can start to do to kind of step into that, into that level of health,
Yeah.
right? We can get overwhelmed whenever you have a list of things you have to do
Yep.
or whatever. We can get overwhelmed very easily,
Mhm.
and then we can like dive and start,
Yeah.
But is it possible to, like I said, find one good healthcare provider if you don't have one, or start doing one crossword puzzle a week, or something like that, just to kind of get healthy habits started
Yeah.
on this.
Yeah, and I think that sense of overwhelm to action, one of the things that I would encourage you to do is to go to this link at the McCants Center for Brain Health, and they have developed something called the Brain Care Score, and it goes through many of these different things that we've talked about today, and it'll ask about where your blood pressure is, and it asks about eating habits, and it asks about social connections and things, and it will actually give you a score. But the score isn't you're a good person or a bad person. Your score looks at it and says, okay, so this is where you're at. Now here are the next steps to help in this. Okay. Or it might be the next step to talk to somebody about that. And so it's a way to kind of move it from, oh, I got to do all these things, to, hey, you know what? In these areas, I'm doing really good. And so in preparation for this, I did my brain care score. And when I did it,
Good person, bad person.
yeah, I'm
Sorry.
yeah,
Sorry.
but it didn't tell me I had to run
Yeah.
a marathon. Okay, that's not what it said. But the flip side is I also have a couple things now that I know that if I'm going to make to grow something in the particular area, I know the 2 things that I need to work on next. The other thing is there's different organizations that have devoted themselves to research around this. And so the 6 pillars of brain health was put together by the Global Council on Brain Health. It's been a popular model that's kind of gone out to a number of places. And then there are other models that are close. But you're going to see these various kinds of things, and we're just not going to get away from it. Diet and exercise are on every one. Sleep is on every one. Social connection on every one.
There's themes that come out.
There's themes. You're gonna find that those and we would all love for this silver bullet to be it.
Yeah.
Lastly is to know about your brain. It is truly a remarkable organ. And that particular website there's others if you look up, things about the brain. But I like this one because it kind of like breaks it down, shows where things are at in the body, and it shows some visuals and things of that nature. And so it's just helpful sometimes to understand, even like if somebody you find out, oh, somebody so and so they had a stroke or whatever. Oh, it was on their, on their right side, right about here. So what's that part of the brain do? What is it about? And so it's helpful to understand those kind of things.
So there's a piece. So there's some resources here listed. There's more, like I said, on the handout that's going to be on the website. There's a piece of learning and research that needs to happen.
Sure.
But I think that the point being here that we've tried to make is that this is an investment in your health.
Yep.
And if it's important, it's worth investing in, right? If there's any questions out there, feel free to unmute and ask them live, or if you haven't, you can chat them in. Otherwise, while we wait for that, Ted, any kind of final thoughts or things to share?
I will just share that my hope is what this does is that you can see whether you're dealing with a disorder that you're trying to deal with, whether you're dealing with prevention or even trying to optimize, whether you're trying to help somebody else, all those different things. One of the things we'll find is that when the brain is nourished, exercised, has adequate sleep, those things, then you know what? We're in the best place to handle life, okay? To handle the stress, to handle the anxiety, to handle the health condition. And you know, we have these things. We want to walk like Christ. We want to live out the fruit of the Spirit. I'll tell you that when I am when I have not slept, when I have been run ragged, when I'm
Yeah.
stressed and I'm just eating whatever I can throw in because I can't get from here to there. You know what? There's not a fruit of the Spirit score, but I'll just say the fruit of the Spirit score is going down.
It's going down.
Okay.
Right.
So
And I think you speak
yeah.
for all of us, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the reality is we can be good stewards.
Yeah.
And that's what we're being called into.
That's what, yep.
Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing and being part of this day and spending some time today. And let's not make this Quitter's Day tomorrow,
Yeah.
but let's proactively lean into the abundant life that God has called us to, and just take small steps towards improving your brain health. And our prayer and our hope is that some of this information today can be helpful to you as you step down that path. So blessings on the rest of your day.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for being part of it.